Welcome to Ignite Intimacy, a podcast exploring intimacy, romantic relationships, sexuality, and the all of everything that relates to these hot topics. We're going in. You ready? This is your host, Miss La. Let's do this. Hello, Ignite Intimacy community. This is Miss La, and we have a very powerful conversation that we're going to hold today on the line. We've got an incredible human being, a gentleman named Adrial, and he is doing some really, really powerful work in the world around dealing with sexual shame, disclosure for STDs, just how to talk about sexuality, your past sexual history or herstory, as I may say, just with more openness and more transparency from a place of real power. So Adrial, thank you so much for being on the line with us today.
Oh yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for the intro.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this is something that's been coming up more and more and more for me, where I just don't feel like there is enough of a conversation, at least in my own experiences, around safe sex, past history of STDs or STIs, any of that. And I've got to say, recently, I have experienced a couple of, and not just recently, in my entire, probably over the last 20 plus years, but recently, specifically, I have encountered a couple of grown men close to 40 or older than 40 who've never been tested for any STDs whatsoever.
Yeah. Yeah.
What is up with that?
Well, there's so much shame, unfortunately, in our culture around sex, and I think a lot of the avoidance of wanting to get results on an STD test, comes from kind of buying into that shame, but also a sense of denial, where it's that whole ignorance is bliss kind of a thing. Yeah. There's, if we've had sex at any point in our lives, there is a chance of getting an STD. That's just the world that we live in. Mm-hmm. So, by avoiding, getting tested, then it is a way of avoiding that possible, seeing the possible truth of having an STD. But there's just unfortunately so much of a stigma around it that people would rather be in the dark than actually know the truth. But then there's a whole level of, like you said in the intro, there's a way that we can be in deeper relationship when we actually know the truth, whether it means having an STD or not, that we can have that kind of a conversation about it.
Totally.
And I'd love to see the safer sex talk be sexy.
Oh yes. Oh yes. Well, absolutely. Because the point is that the safe sex talk is a huge part of being sexual in these days and times, Yeah. Like, how can you even begin to comfortably explore sexuality, sexual intimacy with a partner before you know where they stand?
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's a way that just having the safer sex talk is showing so much. And this is actually getting into, how disclosure can be so powerful in a good way of actually enhancing intimacy as opposed to destroying intimacy, like so many people assume. And the same kind of thing with the safer sex talk, where if we can talk about it from this place of, so I want to get intimate with you on many levels, right? I want to talk about things. I want to connect on a really deep level with you. And that involves talking about what's important to me, what I like, and on the flip side of that, what's risky about this, right? What's the reality of this? What are we getting into together?
Yep.
What is not just my sexual history around STDs, but just what is my sexual history around sex in general? What is my perspective around sex? Have I had
Would I want to have a child with you?
Right. Right. There are so many things to be talked about, but I think I think it comes down to having shame around sex in general, right? There's like, as much as we want to say that we're a really open nation, it's like we're still stuck in this puritanical society when it comes to sex, especially, and intimacy. So opening that up before we actually have sex lays this really awesome foundation for connection and for trust before diving into physical intimacy. I like to say there's a way for us to be emotionally and psychologically intimate as the foundation for physical intimacy. But so much of the time, I think, especially, I mean, not to go into the whole masculine feminine dynamic too much in this, because I know it's kind of a spectrum across the board, but it seems that the more masculine energies out there are like, let's just get the physical part, like, let's dive into that first. And then, yeah, some emotion can come from that, and some trust and bonding and everything. But there's just, it can be so beautiful to have that foundation unfurl, as opposed to like unfurl in like a chronological order of like emotional and psychological intimacy before the physical intimacy happens. It's super sexy.
Listen, I hear you, my brother. You are speaking my language right now. So before we go any further, let me properly introduce you to our community, our Ignite Intimacy community here, because I really want them to have a broader, view on who you are and the type of work that you do in the world. And then we'll just keep diving into this very, very important topic. This touches so many lives, and it's so important to talk about it. So check it out. Adrial specializes in helping people move through sexual shame into a full embrace of their lives. In his own life and from working with hundreds of people, he has seen how shame can cripple connection and intimacy. In his work with the herpes community, through creating the Herpes Opportunity, and in the broader application of relational practices, Adrial supports people in realizing that when they clear shame, they not only have more love and acceptance for themselves, they also have more love and acceptance for others. Wahoo! I totally believe that, and I love this. So Adrial is committed to helping people transcend whatever limitations they may imagine are holding them back from living rich, fulfilling lives. So Adrial, I'd love for you to share with our community, just how did you get involved in this work? Like what brought you to where you are today? Take us back.
In the Wayback Machine. Step into the machine with me here. So, I mean, getting herpes was me hitting rock bottom. Like, we hear that phrase rock bottom a lot when it comes to, I think Alcoholics Anonymous is like the, where that phrase comes from the most. But it's like when we can hit rock bottom in so many ways in our lives. And my rock bottom was getting herpes. And
how old were you? Like, what age were you when you found out?
This was a decade ago, so about 25.
Okay.
26. Yeah. And it was devastating to me. And before I even go any further, I want to also say that, for anyone who's listening who does have herpes, the fact that it was devastating for me doesn't mean that it has to be devastating for everyone. So there is a way that sometimes, even in me telling my story, it can kind of, it might get into people's heads of like, oh yeah, well, if you get herpes, you're going to hit rock bottom. Not necessarily. A lot of people who get herpes are like, oh yeah, this comes with the territory. I got herpes. Oh well, But for me, I had a lot of judgment around people with herpes. Like before I got herpes, I was one of those judgers who was like, oh God, dirty people with STDs. And I see that a lot in people I work with. Like the more judgment and the more shame that someone has around having an STD, they had that equal amount of judgment for those dirty people out there who have STDs before they actually got it. So now they're dealing with their own judgment now reflected inwards. So that's what I found myself like. I was kind of stuck in that self-judgment. All that shame was now just kind of boiling up inside me. So luckily I have a really close relationship with my family. So immediately I called up my mom, and I was like, it was in the middle of the work day. I think I found out at night when I was taking a shower, and it was just one of those moments, like one of those movie moments where my vision just got blurred, and I was just like, oh my God, this is something not so good. And it was a pretty bad first outbreak. So after I got it checked out and went to the doctor and knew what it was, it was the next day, and I immediately called up my mom and was like, hey, could I come and see you? And she met me out front in the parking lot of her work. And we sat down on the side of the parking lot, and I just cried on her shoulder for a long time. I don't even remember how long. It was she just stayed with me for as long as I needed until the tears dried up.
Oh, wow.
And so luckily, like I was able to open up immediately with the people closest to me. I knew that they weren't going to judge me. But the next, and you know how we have relationships in our lives that are almost like, I always see like concentric circles. Like if you throw a pebble in a pond and the concentric circles go out, it's like my immediate concentric circle was my mom and my dad and my brother. And like these people who I knew like had unconditional love for me. And then the next ripple out from that was my close friends. And I knew that they weren't going to judge me. And then the next ripple out from that was kind of my friends, but not really close friends. And then it was like, I was single at the time. So, the next ripple out from that was like the women I hadn't met yet that I wanted to date.
Yeah, totally. Totally.
That felt so far away from me at that point to even consider sharing this thing that I had so much shame around.
Wow. Well, so I'm curious, like, how long did it take you to start sharing this with people outside of, let's say, like your family and like your closest friends, or like maybe your best friend, or, how many years was it until you decided, like, I have to use this. I have to use this as the opportunity, right? Like your whole thing is the herpes opportunity. So like, what opportunity can this create for a bigger conversation and a bigger healing? And so, how many years was it until you started to, what was that moment when you said, I need to start sharing this publicly?
I wish that I had my brain doesn't work in timelines very well. Okay. So I don't really remember how long it was from that point, but I'll tell you the chronological order of things was very much so like that ripple effect in the pond, where the more that I started sharing myself with my closest friends and family, then I started to, this basically launched me on my self-development journey. Like getting herpes actually launched me on my spiritual path, as strange as that may sound to some people. But the whole hitting rock bottom can actually really shift some things in some major ways. So it changed my life. Initially, I thought for the worst, but it really started shifting things toward me being more open and humble and really like vulnerable and really sharing what was up for me, instead of kind of hiding behind a mask of everything's okay, I got it all figured out, all that bullshit. So my self-development journey, like I started going to these weekend workshops, and I decided I wanted to be a life coach, and just all of these ways that once I found the path of really vulnerability and self-discovery, I wanted to stay on that path. It was really important to me to stay on that path. So initially, the reason I became a coach was so that I myself could stay on this path as I was coaching others. In that span of time, I realized to make it stick even more, I wanted to start a men's group, because so much of my life I was friends with women. It was really easy for me to be friends with women because I I guess inherently, I wouldn't have said this back then, but inherently I just felt safe. And men weren't safe to me. And I always felt like I needed like competition and I needed to prove something and one-upsmanship and just all of this stuff. So I didn't really have a lot of trust for men. So I realized that was a huge part of my path, was to actually open myself up to men. So I started a men's group, and a few months into that is when I actually disclosed to the group, after we had started to really develop a strong bond in our group and develop trust in our group. I disclosed to everyone. I was just like, hey guys, I have something to share. And this is really hard for me. And I remember shaking. I was shaking, literally, almost like I was shivering, like it was cold, but just uncontrollable shaking. And I shared it with like the 8 to 10 guys that were there. And I remember that moment of sharing it and being terrified of looking in their eyes because of the assumption of what kind of judgment was going to be coming back at me.
Yeah.
And it was this moment of noticing that I was averting myself from really seeing their reaction. And it actually took a fair amount of courage at that point to actually, it was like a 2-part disclosure. One, I dropped what felt like was the shame bomb. And then part 2 was actually receiving what they had for me, which I assumed was going to be judgment and all this kind of stuff. I guess logically, I didn't think that they were going to judge me outright, but definitely viscerally on a deep level, I thought for sure like there was just going to be this like really nasty judgment in the room. But when I actually started looking around the room, I'm sorry, you were going to.
No, please carry on.
Okay. Yeah. Don't want to steamroll you.
Bring it.
As I started looking around the room, it was so touching because I had started to tear up and cry, and I was trying to hide that. But when I started to look around the room, I saw other guys crying. I saw like the other guys like being touched and moved, and it was a mind fuck to me. Because in that moment, it was just like, oh my God, this is respect. This is support. This is connection. You know, like this is what I was terrified of, not necessarily the herpes, but of the vulnerability of sharing something that I had shame around.
Well, and so 2 things are coming up for me. So I think it's very interesting that you had so much fear about sharing with these men in this safe, confidential men's group that you had created. And I haven't even heard you yet talk about the fear of presenting it to a potential sexually intimate partner.
Yeah.
You know, so I'm just sensing into that.
Yeah, well, that's the whole ripple effect that I'm talking about, because it was like after sharing with my really close family members and then my really close friends, and then I started talking to more acquaintances about it actually after the men's group. So it was like it kind of did feel like I was like the ripple was expanding larger and larger as time went on, and it was almost like, with each time that I shared about herpes, and really, if we just boil it down, it was just each time that I was vulnerable and didn't die.
Because of being vulnerable, right?
Yeah, totally. There's that, the reptilian brain that's just so, it's like, it's the fight or flight. It's the part of us that's like, if I share myself vulnerably, and especially with something that I have a lot of judgment or shame about myself, then I'm going to be excommunicated from humanity. It's really that kind of a visceral feeling of like, oh shit, oh, this is horrible.
Yeah.
So as every time I was able to share vulnerably and be received and have people reflect back and say, wow, thanks for sharing that. Like the more and more times that I was accepted versus rejected, then I got to build that foundation inside myself of self-acceptance more and more, to then recognize that, oh, wow, it doesn't actually matter whether I get accepted or rejected in the real world because of this herpes thing. It really was all about my self-acceptance the whole time. So after the men's group, it was like, oh, wow, okay, I feel like there is something really powerful in this being willing to share ourselves in our shame with self-acceptance. Because by very nature, shame exists in this icky, sticky, ooey gooey nastiness of self-judgment. And that's just broken, and I'm not okay how I am. So when I can actually share my shame from self-acceptance, it zaps it. It's like the charge that is involved in that shame holding on its grip really tight loosens a bit every time that I can share myself in a safe and trusting space that, it loosens its grip. So the next layer of that, starting to disclose to to the opposite sex, holy crap.
Well, let me pause you there for a second. We'll get to that. We're going to get to that because I want you to share some of the tools and tips that you share with your community about how to do that, and how you can actually do that. But there's one more piece that I want to touch on, and that is that piece of when you start to share, like when, we are dealing with a particular issue, whether it's an STD or depression or suicidal thoughts or drug or alcohol abuse or in a physically abusive relationship or something like that. I feel like as human beings, we tend to think we're all alone. Like we're the only one. There cannot possibly be anyone else in our sphere that has dealt with this. And we're the only ones. And I feel like that compounds the shame. Like it just makes it so much bigger than it actually is.
Yeah. You've probably seen Brene Brown's work.
Yeah.
Yeah. And for anyone listening who hasn't seen Brene Brown, definitely jump on that. She has an amazing TED Talk about this, about shame and resiliency. And she says a really poignant thing around shame, that it can't exist in a supportive community. That's not exactly what she said, but that's the essence of it. That, shame tells you that, you are the only one. You are uniquely broken. And there's no hope for you. So if you share it with others, then you're just going to be thrown out and everyone's going to judge you. So you better keep it to yourself. But ironically, the only way to find out that you are not the only one is to share it. So it's this catch-22 of like, do I trust that sharing it will actually, bring me the connection that I really want?
And it doesn't always, right? Like there are times where it's not well received.
Right. Yeah. That's why when I help people through this process, because that's what it is. It's a process. And anyone who might see me or anyone else who is totally okay with having herpes now, or, whatever it is in their lives that may seem like, oh my God, they're totally over this. Most likely it didn't happen in an instant.
Yeah.
And that's like a really important thing to recognize, that I had my process. Everyone has their own process, especially from deep shame into self-acceptance.
Oh yeah.
And so the process of unfurling, like a flower blossoms. I like to use that metaphor a lot. A flower in this way, it's like, especially the first few petals that unfurl, they need to unfurl in a place of deep and profound trust. And especially if there's a lot of self-judgment, it kind of runs in parallel, or not in parallel, what would that be? Kind of the opposite. If there is a lot of self-shame and self-judgment, then there needs to be a lot of trust. And a lot of love, that the potential of being rejected by my mother was very low for me. But I've coached some people before where they're like, I don't trust my mom. Like
they're like, my mom's the last person I would ever tell.
Exactly. And for certain people, it's their sister or it's their guidance counselor or, right. It's like the way to really to start that blossoming process is to look around your life and to ask, like, who do I feel most safe with? Who do I feel like I can be myself with the most, right? There's going to be someone that at least fits that bill. That's where to start. So just because I started with my mom doesn't mean that everyone starts with their mom. You just look at the relationships that hold the most acceptance. And from there, that's where the next petals of the flower start to unfurl, because you can be unconditionally loved and accepted. Then you start to love and accept yourself more. And then you can more into those ripples, those concentric circles where, there might actually be a judgment and a rejection. But at that point, have enough self-acceptance to recognize that a rejection doesn't actually mean that you are a broken human being.
It just means, like, not everyone's going to like you. Like, it's kind of as simple as that. Like, not everyone is going to like you. And so I have been wanting to come out myself around this whole issue because, I can relate to so much of what you're saying because I also have herpes and I've had it for like 12 years. And I've got to say, I totally agree. It was a huge turning point in my life, and like at first I was in Maui for my twin sister's wedding when I got my first outbreak. And so I'm supposed to be there and be like fully in joy and celebrating her and swimming in the ocean. And like, I'd never been to the Hawaiian Islands before. And here this outbreak comes on and it totally consumed me the entire time. And I had no idea what was going on. And I was terrified. And it was so, I felt broken. I felt even more broken than I felt before that, and I've had my challenges in my life and a lot of just my own building I've had to do to like build up my own self-esteem and my own self-worth and my own sense of self-worth and my own self-love and all of that. And this came along and it did. I mean, for me, it devastated me at first. And I felt so alienated. And I was in my late 20s and I knew the person that, I had gotten it from and he wasn't, come to find out he wasn't being honest with me about, like he was seeing other people while we were seeing each other and, and it just was, there was betrayal there was, just so many things. And for everyone listening, he was totally unwilling to get tested, unwilling to get tested. Same with my daughter's father, totally unwilling to get tested. And that is a huge, huge red flag for me today. So for anyone out there, if you are insisting that your potential partner or current partner or one of your partners, if you are like insisting that you both go and do the mature adult thing, go get a freaking STD test. And do it alone, do it together, but do it. And if someone is saying no, if someone keeps putting it off, oh, I can't afford it, oh, I can't this, I can't that, guess what? There are free clinics everywhere in America, okay? And it is your health, it is your wealth, it is what you have, and once you get something like herpes, it doesn't go away, and it's something that does, for most people gets better over time. So it's not like it's like the first time every time, but, it's like, first and foremost, if you're with a partner that's refusing to get tested with you, I say show them the door. Show them the door, because you know what? How can you build trust and real intimacy with someone who refuses to take care of their health, not only for themselves, but also for the relationship, the health of the relationship? And that was my big warning sign is, and now, every time I've come up against this issue where there's a man in my world who refuses to get tested, I'm like, oh no. You're not going to get this good, okay? You don't get this good because it's not worth it, and really
there is a definite potential of, when people are in that avoidance, that there's something that they don't want to look at in themselves. And then there's the potential of that impacting someone very much so directly, whatever it is that they don't want to look at can impact their relationships. But I actually wanted to go back to just really highlighting that you just disclosed to your whole community. And I just wanted to circle back with that and just see what that's like for you to disclose in a public way.
Well, I mean, honestly, I feel emotional about it because it's felt like a weight that I've carried for all these years, and I've had a lot of conversations with potential partners about it. And, like sometimes you have to go backwards in order to go forwards, and so at first I just felt so ashamed. I felt like it was just one more tick on my wall of shame, it was like just one more thing that I had done wrong in my life, and I felt deeply, deeply ashamed about it and dirty and broken, But then what started to happen is I went within myself, and very close to that time frame, I eventually broke up with this partner, and it was a devastating blow. The whole way the whole thing went down, and it was just like this huge wake-up call for me, and really what started to happen is it brought me into alignment with learning how to love myself fully and wholly. And until I was 29 years old, people would say, you need to learn how to love yourself. You need to, and I would look at them like wide-eyed, like I have
what does that
no
mean? Yeah.
idea what that means. You are talking another language. You're speaking another language to me. I don't understand. Like, I don't know what it is to love myself, And so it was like all these positive things started to happen. I cut cords with a lot of lovers, and I mean, because back in the day, man, I could have 5 lovers at once, like not all at once, but
I was about to say, man, yeah, rocket.
Yeah, well, no, like I would have like different men in my world, and so it was like, first of all, I just cut all of that off. It was like, okay, like you really, because I've always been a sexual creature. Like I've always, since my adolescence, I was connected to my power. That's the sexualness in me, and I don't know where it came from. I don't know how or why, but it's always something I've been aware of since a very young age. So I just reined it in, and I was like, okay, everyone's cut off,
Yeah.
And then it was a rebuilding.
It sounds like that in that there was like this natural cutting everyone else out. I imagine was something around like, I'm cutting everyone else out so that I can get reconnected to myself and find out who I am in the absence of everyone else.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's exactly what happened, Adrial. And it was a slow and challenging and beautiful process. And slowly but surely through the years, I started to just speak it to my friends. Like, oh, I don't know if you know this about me, but I do have herpes. And like, and then what started to happen is some of my friends said, well, I have herpes thas And I was like, oh my goddess, like I'm not the only one in my close friends circle that has been dealing with this, So then that connection started, like, I'm not the only one.
Right.
And then you feel less broken and less alone. And so there's power in sharing, and there's power in having the courage to share. And like, I mean, I've had some different responses from potential partners about it, like, when I've shared it, but I want to get into that part with you in the next few minutes here, Adrial. But I mean, all in all, it's like, I feel like we need to level the playing field. And for years, I've been saying, I want to come out about this. I want to be courageous about this because I know I'm not broken. And I know that ultimately I'm whole, complete, and perfect. And just because somewhere along the line, I contracted this thing, and like, really, I call it a gift. I'm like, he gave me a gift because I have to out myself. every time, and like, I haven't always been perfect about it. And the timing has not always been great, but it is my commitment to speak on it, because I believe it's the other person on the other end. They deserve to know.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's your integrity that continues to grow with every time that you disclose. And I want to also really just commend you on your courage of coming out on this recording that's going to go out to the community. There's, I can hear the emotion in your voice. I can hear there's a lot there. And I just want to honor that a whole lot more was shared beyond just the fact that you have herpes. Like it seems like there's a deeper sense of you was shared.
Thank you. Yeah, I've got my walls. I definitely have my, like my walls and my like, oh, this, like this is who I am. This is who I am. But like, there are a lot of people who don't get to really experience the fullness of me,
Mm-hmm.
So, so thank you. I so appreciate the acknowledgement and just the space to be able to share this. I mean, you're being so courageous to do the work that you're doing as a result of contracting herpes so many years ago. Like, it gave me the courage to say, now is the time. Like, I'm going to just do this,
Yeah. Yeah. And also I want to underline for people who might be listening who have herpes and might actually feel like, oh, well, now I should go like disclose to a whole community or whatever, to remember that everyone, again, has their own process. And there are some people who I've coached who are like, yeah, I just want to tell everyone because I got no shame, whatever. Like, I just want to practice disclosing to strangers as I like, whatever. But then other people are like, nobody but the people that I am sexual with deserve to know. And that's their prerogative. So recognizing that there is a whole spectrum of how each individual chooses to be with their vulnerability and who deserves to know and who doesn't. And it's a very personal thing.
Totally.
Yeah. So I just wanted to underline that.
Well, yeah. And because, I know that I, in my past, have gone and disclosed some things that I thought like I should just do it. And it wasn't the right time. And I wasn't ready. I wasn't prepared emotionally or, mentally. And of course, like, I made it through that, but it was like, it really shook me because it wasn't necessarily the right time. So,
Right.
So, okay. Yeah. So let's talk about just that conversation, you know? So like with a potential sexually intimate partner, or maybe someone that you've already messed around with a bit, like, let's talk about having that conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I guess the first thing that I would want to speak on is like the thing that I get asked the most is, when do I disclose?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And the kind of coy, tongue-in-cheek answer that I always give is, sometime between when you first meet them and having sex and like getting married and having kids and all this, right? There's like, it's somewhere in that spectrum that it's going to happen. And then to zero in on when the time is, do I feel like, to ask yourself this question, do I feel like I can trust this person with my vulnerability? That's a big question. Because I know that, like, especially in my younger days, I wanted to just like, jump into bed with women that I didn't really know and didn't really see it as a vulnerable act even. It was like, oh yeah, this is just sex, whatever. But to actually connect the disclosure and opening myself up in a vulnerable way, in a very real way, that goes hand in hand, runs in tandem with the act of having sex. It's emotional vulnerability and physical vulnerability. So asking myself this question of, can I trust this person with my vulnerability? Will give us the answer of, maybe this person isn't the kind of person I even really want to get intimate with. If there's this feeling of, I really don't trust this person at all.
Yeah.
Then, well, why would I want to have sex with them and get into an intimate relationship? Even if it's like one night.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you really want to open yourself up to someone that you don't really trust? That's one. And then the other is, maybe I don't trust them right now. So that means that I don't have sex with them until I develop this trust, right? So that is a really good gauge that, there is no black and white response of, well, you need to disclose on the third date.
Yeah, exactly.
Whatever. And nobody knows that.
And it's an intuitive thing, right? So like trusting the timing, and like, first of all, let us all remember that when we are sexual with someone else, there is an exchange of energy that takes place. So if this isn't someone that you would like want in your home, or maybe introducing them to your best friend or your parents or like someone else you love and trust, like, let's remember that there is an energetic exchange that happens when we're sexually intimate with someone. So, so I love that question, like, do I trust this person, And I've got to say, it's not necessarily, in my experience, a cut and dry, like, yes or no. Like, I disclosed, two different men. One I hardly knew. The other one I've known on and off for, 13 or 14 years. And the one that I've known for the longest, never heard from him again. Literally, he dropped off the face of the earth, never responded to any of my calls or text messages, and I just have never heard from him again. The other one that I really didn't know that well, and I was kind of like, can I trust this person? I'm not really sure, because I don't know him. I haven't known him long enough. He was so freaking chill about it. Like, he was like, oh yeah, my ex-girlfriend had that. And, we were just careful, but I'm still going to lick your pussy. And I was like, awesome.
Well, fine then. That sounds like a plan. Yeah.
It's like, I love that answer. I love that response, So it's
best disclosure response ever, right?
Well, totally. I was like, you win the prize. You win the prize, And I've gotten a lot of love, and I've had men just be like, oh, sweetie, come here, like, let me hold you, and I've gotten a lot of love. And I've also gotten just a handful of like, whoa, I've never dealt with this. And when a 50-year-old man tells me he's never dealt with this before, I think you're not having these conversations. That's why you haven't dealt with this. Like, you've been with women that probably have it or something else, and they're just not telling you. And you probably just don't talk about this, And so I feel like every conversation that I have about it allows the other person to say, oh, maybe this is a conversation I should be having about this, Like, so, yeah. And it's not just it's not just sexual intercourse. It's like, before you put someone's dick in your mouth, have the conversation. Okay, like, just to be blunt, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah. There's a way that in our culture, like the commodification of sex is just blows my mind. Of just like, that it's become like not a big deal. It's just like, it's just something that you do on the first date, and or there's expectations around it, especially with, like, it tends to be more from the men expecting it from the women. I've heard so many women who are just like, God, if I don't have sex with him by the third date, then I'm going to lose him. I'm going to lose a good thing. Yeah. Right. And that just breaks my heart to hear that, because what happens a lot is, especially with really heart-centered women, like they want the kind of man who is going to truly respect them and see them on a deep level, right? And the irony there is that there's this willingness to settle in the moment for someone who has this expectation of like, well, if you don't have sex on the third date, then I'm going the other way. That's not the kind of relationship that ultimately is wanted on a really deep level.
Totally.
So there's a way that being okay with whatever response comes back, there's a way that we can actually shift our psychology to say, okay, instead of it being a rejection, what if it is actually
protection?
What if it's a protection? I like that. What if it's protection? What if it's actually thinning the herd?
Yes.
to the kind of person that I truly want to be with is the person who's going to see me instead of my herpes.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
So yeah. It's a powerful way to look at it.
Well, it is. And also, someone I was around recently, I've heard this before through the years, but like, rejection is God's protection or goddess's protection or creator's protection, right? So when you're rejected by someone, we can always flip the script on that and say, thank you, thank you for whatever it is you're keeping me from, because I know if it was right for me, it would be a go. So rejection is creator's protection, right? And yeah, man.
Yeah. Who's to say what the right relationship is for us? Like, we can have all the preferences that we want, but when it comes down to it, it's not like a science experiment where I can create all these qualities that I'm looking for in a mate, and then I'm going to create this person in my lab.
Yeah.
It's like there's always going to be an aspect, and it's great to know what we want, right? And don't go into it blind. But there's like a yin and yang to it. There's like the logical side of it, and then there's the magic and the mystery of it. So the magic and the mystery of it is like, all right, who's to say who I'm going to really end up connecting with? And if someone rejects me because of herpes, then okay, well, I actually want the kind of person who's going to be okay with this, obviously, because I'm going to have this for life, but also appreciate my integrity, appreciate the qualities that I possess, that I'm actually demonstrating in disclosing, right? My integrity, my depth, my trust, my courage, right? Not that you're going to go into it being like, hey, man, look at my courage. Look at how amazing I am.
Yeah.
Right. It doesn't come from that place. It comes from a place of, hey, I accept myself for what I got, and I want to know you on a deeper level too. Right. And part of doing that is to open up. And here I am opening up. And I'd love to hear, what struggles you have. I love to hear what lights you up in life. Right. I'd love to hear everything.
Yep.
It's that process of opening up.
Absolutely. Well, and the thing that one of the big gifts that I got from, my diagnosis was more self-care, like getting enough rest, eating the right foods, knowing, how to take care of myself when I felt an outbreak coming on.
Yeah.
Having supportive people, whether it's a therapist or dear friends or a mentor, someone that I can speak to when things get tough, when I feel that shame bubble up, And so Adrial, tell our community, how can people find you online?
Well, if you go to herpesopportunity.com, that's kind of the landing page to everything. You'll see links along the top to get to the forum and to read the blog, and you can contact me for coaching from there. My email is hello@thehopp.com. So that's hello@thehopp.com. And I'd love to hear from anyone who wants support. I coach people one-on-one through shame resiliency. And I also have a monthly group it's a support group for people to come on a phone line, and you can be as anonymous as you'd like, and you get to share yourself if you want to, or you can hear other people share what they're going through with herpes specifically. And it's a really safe space to practice sharing what has shame wrapped around it. So it's a space of practicing opening up to strangers in an anonymous way. So it's a good first step, especially for people who might feel like they are really in the grips of shame and they can't tell anyone.
And this is a virtual group, right? Like over the phone?
Yeah, it's over the phone.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, this is so powerful. So herpesopportunity.com, or it's hello@thehop.com.
Yeah,
Okay,
exactly.
great. Well, ladies and gentlemen and everyone else, we love you. We're just so grateful that we can, hold a space for this kind of dynamic and powerful conversation. And please, if you are out there and you have been recently diagnosed, or you've been living with herpes or some other type of STD for too long, and you feel like you need more support, or you just want to start having, more just real and transparent, vulnerable conversations and feel supported in that, reach out. Going to Adrial's website, herpesopportunity.com, is a good place to start, or find someone in your community, go to Planned Parenthood. I mean, just do what you've got to do and take care of yourself, and just know it's not the end of the world. I mean, what are the more recent statistics on herpes?
Well, it's 16% of Americans have herpes, and that's HSV2, and it's 1/4 of women and 10% of men. So that's how it breaks down statistically within that 16%.
Okay.
So there are many, many more people who have herpes than you may be assuming.
Oh, yeah.
In your day-to-day life, you're walking around and you just see 1 out of 4 women and 1 out of 10 guys. And 80% of people who have herpes don't know it. So that goes along with the whole denial piece, where people aren't getting tested because they might be afraid of what they have. And if they do have an outbreak, they just say, oh, it's probably an ingrown hair, or there's just a way that our culture can be in denial about these things. But there is a certain sense of freedom that comes from actually knowing your status and actually then being able to take care of yourself on a deeper level, psychologically, physically, and then, of course, to be able to take care of your partners, your future partners, your current partner. Like, knowing your status really helps you to kind of clear the slate and then dive into deeper intimacy together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And look, it can be scary. I remember, well, let me be honest, pretty much every time I get an HIV test, I'm freaked out,
Oh, dude, me too.
But the feeling of the negative result is yes, and I'm taking care of myself and I'm being responsible, and so we're leveling the playing field here. Okay. 16% of Americans, definitely someone has it. Opening the conversation, just starting to have these transparent conversations with people that we want to be intimate with, or people that we're already intimate with. It's never too late to open up that door. And what I've found now, 12 years in, for having this conversation over and over and over again, is at this point in time, I'm just kind of so look, before we get hot and heavy, I've got something to tell you. I have herpes. And I just literally, it's very matter of fact. I don't go into in the earlier days, it was definitely more delicate for me. And I was but now it's just this is the deal, and
here are the facts.
If you want the good, you need to know. And then you can make a conscious choice, because guess what? I didn't get to make the conscious choice because I was with someone who didn't have the courage to be transparent with me about what was really going on in his life.
Right.
And so I feel the least I can do is be honest and upfront with people and say, look, this is what it is, and if you don't want to move forward, that's cool, and if you do, then let's go on this adventure together, and we'll just be careful.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, and this goes back to the beginning of our conversation about how the disclosure talk, or having the safer sex talk, can be really sexy, because when it comes down to it, integrity is the sexiest thing. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Like, when I can be like an adult and I know that I am with another adult and we are like upfront and on the same page and we got everything out on the table and like we know what we're getting into, there's just a different level that we get to drop into together. It's just so powerful.
That's
so yeah,
hot.
integrity is sexy.
And I've had men say to me, like, girl, man, like, you are courageous, girl. Like, damn, that's sexy. Yeah. I've had men tell me that's sexy. Like,
yes,
wow.
Yes. Knowing yourself and being okay with yourself and self-acceptance. I mean, that is, that's where it's at. It's undeniable.
That's where it's at. So everyone get on the train because that's where it's at, you know? And I also just want to say that if you have herpes 1 on your mouth and your lips, that if you know that you get, cold sores every now and again, be mindful of that. And if you feel one coming on, or if you have one, or if you're healing from one, don't go down on your partner.
Yeah. 50% of new genital herpes cases are HSV1 from cold sores.
Yep. So be mindful of that, everyone. We want to be in the know, because when we're in the know, we can make powerful life choices from that place. Adrial, herpesopportunity.com. I am so freaking grateful that we met and like just so lifted up by this conversation. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh yeah, me too. It was a really fun and enlivened conversation. I really appreciate your energy and your courage for coming out and sharing with the community and trusting me, trusting the community, trusting the world for you to be able to share this and be in a good space about it. So thank you.
Well, thank you so much. And, I'm just so grateful and honored to be here with you today. And I figured, well, shit, if I tell everyone, then I don't have to have one-on-one conversations anymore. I can be like, oh, here, you want to get jiggy with me? Yeah, you want to get jiggy with me? Listen to this episode and then we'll have a conversation.
That's so great.
Well, look, I look forward to connecting with you more, Adrial, and to the Ignite Intimacy community. Thank you so much for being here with us. If you know anyone who's struggling with a recent diagnosis or an old one that they haven't come to terms with, or just, someone that has contracted an STD and you think it would be helpful for them to hear this conversation, please share it. Check us out on iTunes, leave a review, and check us out online, igniteintimacy.com. And please, if you'd like to share some thoughts or, you want to just touch base with us directly, you can do so via email, hello@igniteintimacy.com, hello@igniteintimacy.com. Big up yourselves, bless up yourselves. It's sexy to be confident and in the know. So we're going to keep it rolling. Stay blessed, and we'll see you on the next one.
Bye, everyone.
Give thanks for tuning in to another conversation on the Ignite Intimacy podcast hotline. We love that you choose to spend your time with us. Check us out online at igniteintimacy.com and subscribe to us on iTunes. Also, tell your friends all about it. This beautiful music was arranged by Jason Pfaff and Mike Corey, and this podcast is produced by yours truly, Miss La. Give thanks again, and we'll see you on the next one. In the meantime, let your light shine bright and ignite your intimacy.